Welcome to this first roundtable conversation here with Nadia and with Mimi. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at challenges, global challenges that business leaders are facing. Not only business leaders, but leaders of any type of organization. And that's why we call them managerial challenges in the 21st century. They're global in scope. And we're using a book that I happen to be the author of to understand what are the potential foundations, the mindsets, the underlying assumptions that have guided us to where we are right now. We see there are a number of developments happening. They're happening quite rapidly, and just recently in 2019, we've had a number of sort of pivot points. Statements of the purpose of corporation have shifted. CEOs in America have banded together and said, we need to shift the way we think about what we're doing. Larry Fink, some of the major investors have suggested for some time that CEOs need to think about what they're doing, what kind of value they're creating. And I think that's where our conversation starts. It's like, why is this happening? Why is this occurring at this point in time? And what are potential explanations for what has happened so far? And where is the future sort of management going? So looking at the introduction and chapter 1, what sort of resonated with you, spoke with you? I know you have your own experiences in the field of management, so maybe you can just share a little bit.
I think what really spoke to me is obviously 2019 from, I'd say 2012 to 2019 has been a pretty turbulent time, from Brexit to the rise of the far right in Europe and the US. And for some people, the election of Trump has led to a lot of people thinking that we have gone back rather than progress forward to saving the planet. And even more so in the past 3 days from like August 1st to the 20th, the Amazon in Brazil has been burning. And I think these are things that have brought us here to understanding what can corporations do to stop this. You know, governments are going to change all the time, and it's on corporations to more or less be the ones to be like, we'll hold down the fort while far rights rise and far lefts rise. And so for me, as we were reading this, I think a really big thing we were talking about is just terrorism, war, mass migration, all these things that are a result of people not caring previously, that are now affecting how things go. So we're like seeing in businesses seas rising and boats can't cross or land in ports because the ports are now too shallow for these boats because the seas are too high. And so for me, I think it's understanding that there's more than just economics that go into how we manage companies, so we need to understand the human factors and how do we make humans really value what they're doing and want to be involved. Because while we're working and not caring, we're pretty much just doing exactly as we're told and not asking the question of why and how can we do this better and how can we care more about who this is impacting.
Oh, okay, great.
Absolutely. I completely agree with everything that you just said. And also one of my other takeaways, even just from the first chapter alone, was that we're seeing a shift in our consumers. We have a growing number of consumers who are much more socially conscious and are holding corporations to certain expectations. And quite frankly, we are living in a very turbulent time. You know, there is climate change, there is mass migration, there's all sorts of social issues that are at the forefront of society right now. And frankly, for organizations to not act on them is seen as negligent. And consumers are really responding to that. It's not just about what is the lowest price I can get. It's who are the companies that are acting ethically and responsibly and or taking action. And then that's actually driving value. And a bigger shift that we've also seen is that this means that corporations have to adopt more long-term thinking, because climate change is not an answer that can be solved tomorrow. And it would also be negligent to assume that corporations are not responsible for a lot of the exacerbated conditions that we found ourselves in.
Yeah, I agree. And just like thinking about it, it's while they have to make that change, we were talking before we started rolling that trust is the biggest problem. And I think that's what we were talking about too, is like, so great, we have this letter from August 2019 from all these companies, but so what? I'm looking at half of these and some are BP and Exxon, and great, you've done oil spills that have ruined the Gulf and that they're still recovering from. And how am I going to trust that you want this versus companies like Patagonia and the North Face that have always been so focused on the bigger picture. Like Patagonia's big mission is recycling their own clothes and giving people new clothes and like protecting our natural resources. So I'm more inclined to trust them rather than some companies that have decided that, oh, it's in our best interest to now make more value for our shareholders, which are now a larger conglomerate. It's not just the people who have stock, but it's people who are using us. It's people on this earth. So I think like one of the bigger issues is trust. And of that same vein, you see corporations kind of, for example, in June, it's Pride Month in the United States, and companies all of a sudden have all their logos now have rainbow flags, and everyone is like, great, we all support gay pride, LGBTQ and everything else pride. But where are you the rest of the year? So I think it's cool to just write that and say you agree, but where do you stand 11 out of those 12 months? So I think that's something they have to build on too, is besides putting out a statement, it's putting their money where their mouth is.
And I think what's sort of interesting to see, if you've stepped back, is corporations with the typical mantra of maximizing profit have not been very political. They've been focused on economics, right? That was the mantra. And now the expectation is become political, right? If the state is functioning, okay, maybe companies can do what is economically reasonable. And if we have these massive challenges, like on the system level with environmental challenges, climate change, one of the primary ones, the social inequity crisis that leads to mass migration and now potentially terrorism or other things, right? Those are things that typical business people in MBA programs don't necessarily learn about, right? And you can correct me if I'm wrong. On the other hand, we have these challenges at the organizational level. People don't trust an organization, whether they're consumers or suppliers or employees. They're not engaged. The employees are not engaged, right? And individuals aren't excited, highly excited to be working and to be living, right? We have massive drug crises and other types of crises where people are actually quite miserable. They're anxious. They're afraid of the future. This is in some way unprecedented to the degree that any organization, nonprofit organizations, governments, corporations, need to be aware of it. They need to become much more societally aware, players in society. It's business in society. It's not business and society. Right. And so I think part of what the setup is here is we're seeing a shift back from business as embedded, which was sort of before the core assumption, to business being disembedded as whatever is good for me, for business, as profit maximizer, is good for society. Back to, no, this is not good enough. You need to sort of pick up on all the societal issues, whether they are LGBT, right, or something else about climate change, or consumer awareness, or something like that. Like, you need to be aware. You need to become much more of embedded in society again. You need to be a societal player for this to work. And I think this is sort of the core challenges, students, for all business students out there, for CEOs, that you understand this is a massive shift in thinking about the role of business and management in society. You cannot escape societal pressures, environmental pressures. You cannot be negligent if you want to be successful. So becoming a citizen, becoming more fully human is really the challenge of the day. And many CEOs don't know how to do that. Yet they put out documents that say they would want to.
Right.
Okay? And this is where the rubber hits the road. It's like, can you? And this is what this course is about. Okay? How can you enable yourself? How can you help organizations that are trying to do that to become better citizens?